Hi, guys, and welcome back to the show. So, today we're going to be looking at a couple of cases. It's going to be a bit of a recap. We are going to be honoring some of the vibrant women and men who have unfortunately are not with us anymore. So, one of the first cases we're going to be looking at is Olorato, and a woman full of promise. I was reading yesterday, Gone Too Soon. She was taken in such a brutal way. We're going to be talking about that. What has been done so far, the leads, the people that have been arrested. We're going to be touching on some other cases as well. So join us, grab a cup of tea, get comfortable as we dive into the latest cases and have a look at them. Over to you, Ira.
Thank you, Ruth. Welcome to our healed community. Together, when we set a little bit of time aside to hold space for these beautiful souls who have unfortunately become victim to what has really become an epidemic: gender-based violence, sexually based violence. We just want to honor the impact that their story has towards creating change, and we want to be a part of that change. So this week, we give you a preview of the state of the world and crime today. A very, very tiny portion, that's what we're going to cover here. There are so many stories coming out on a regular basis. I wish that we could talk about all of them. It's just not possible. It's overwhelming. Sexually motivated crimes are happening at an alarming rate, and we cannot mention them all. Too many stories are not being told. But this does not mean that every victim's story does not matter. This is a small effort on our behalf towards creating awareness. And we welcome you and we appreciate all of you for being here with us today. So let me begin. I wanted to recap the cases that have sort of come out in our news here in South Africa, Ruth, just over the last 2 weeks. Impossible. Every day. And doing this work, since you and I have decided to create space for this kind of storytelling and to spread awareness, it's just you've got to have a solid spine to hold you up, because it shines a light on how helpless so many people must be feeling. Victims and their families must be feeling. I don't know how the police are even able to keep up with all of these cases. So I was able to bring some information just on a few. And every time we get together, we will do whatever little bit we can, because every bit counts. So I want to begin, Ruth, by telling the audience and sharing with you my first case. I don't have the victims' names. That has not been that's not been shared, but I did receive the information from a statement that was made by the police spokesperson. So this first case is about 2 police trainees who were allegedly raped and assaulted by a police captain that is linked to the Tshwane Police Academy. According to the police spokesperson, the case was brought to the attention of the SAPS on the 6th of May, and within less than 24 hours, the Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Investigations Unit had arrested the 59-year-old captain. He has been in police custody ever since, and a second victim then came forward. So the captain's salary has been suspended, and his disciplinary hearing is expected to be heard on the 4th and 5th of June. So that is the only information I have. Now, in a country where our unemployment rate is so high, the majority of our people of color, cannot afford an education. Women are not safe within our police. What does this tell us about the characters that are supposed to protect women and children? This is a 59-year-old captain. Imagine how long he's been in the force.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Ruth?
That is absolutely shocking. I've not heard about this one before, but this is a classic example of those that are in power absolutely abusing that power. And they're having a total disregard for, I imagine there's an oath or something that is taken up when you become a police officer. So having a total disregard for the law. And it is just shocking. And I just want to think about the victims, thinking that you're in an environment, in the police of all places, that is supposed to be the safest environment. You're surrounded by colleagues who have similar values, you would think, who share the same sort of rapport. You all fighting for justice. And that is the biggest injustice, I would think, that someone would betray you in such a way, and violate you in such a way. And I'm glad that he's in custody, but what a shocker. That is the last place that you would think that an assault of this nature would occur. Really
Absolutely.
sad.
And just think about the betrayal of the nation. You know, this department is supposed to be set up to protect us. Does this not give us insight into what victims deal with when they go to these departments to report, expecting help? Does this give us insight into the mindset of some of these people? This is a 59-year-old captain. It's been how many years has he been in the police force? This is not the kind of behavior that just happens by chance overnight. This is behavior that escalates over time. How many other victims are there? And then these are people with, imagine the arrogance that I can do this to people, to trainees within a training facility that are going to become law enforcement officers, and I'm comfortable that I can get away with it. That kind of arrogance speaks to then what happens to the voiceless, to the victim that walks in, that is not going to get the media coverage, is not a well-known name, does not have the kind of family that's going to be, has the resources to reach out and get assistance and the media coverage that some of our victims do. What does this say to us about the mindset and the culture? Because how do you get away with this kind of behavior or go unrecognized for so long?
It just, for me, it highlights again that women are not safe, not even in the institutions of work. They're not safe. The very institutions that are meant to protect them. The fact that police trainees, young women, these are young women, this is their first jobs. Young women just starting their careers have allegedly been assaulted by a senior officer. It's not only a betrayal of trust, but it's a stark reflection of the systemic rot that still exists. And it's not only in South Africa. We see it in many other. I've just read about the American Army, where several cases there is a documentary about a young female that was allegedly assaulted by the United States Army, a sergeant, and her body was later discovered, and her family was looking for her for weeks. So this brings into question the leadership positions. When leadership positions are held by individual people that are capable of such violence, it signals a complete failure in the vetting, the accountability, and the cultural integrity of those institutions. Suspending his salary, when you spoke about that now, I'm thinking, initiating a disciplinary hearing, did you say, Eva? That is a start, but I don't think it's enough. What we need is a cultural shift, and this is on a global level. One that begins with better recruitment, trauma-informed training, mental health support, and a zero tolerance for abuse. And I'm really glad that quick action, I don't know the timeline of how quickly it was acted on, but I'm glad that he was suspended and is no longer in that environment where he can harm others.
Yeah. Well, according to the police spokesperson, it was within less than 24 hours. I think it was very important for her to make that statement. The reality is that you are right, Ruth. There is a cultural shift that needs to take place, because clearly we have the current mindset, the current what we're willing to overlook with our colleagues within the workspace, the level of accountability, of training. I mean, you wouldn't imagine. I'm thinking about our course in our course in recovery that speaks about teachers' safe spaces, and you wouldn't imagine that in the police that wouldn't already exist. You know what I mean? But clearly it doesn't. Clearly, it is lacking in so many ways. There's a lot of training that needs to take place, but even on a with amongst parents, what is it that our boys are not being taught? What is going over? What is overlooked? And our girls. I came across a gentleman's TikTok post where he says he lost a long-term friend, childhood friend, because he called his friend out about abusive behavior that he didn't even know was taking place over a long period of time. He happened to be at his friend's house, and when he was leaving, he heard his friend's girlfriend cry out, and when he went back inside, he was on top of her, choking her, and everything seemed fine. So it was shocking to him, and he decided as that he needs to have a word with him and say, this cannot happen again, blah blah blah. And that relationship is over. It's never been the same. One would think that should be a normal thing, that we would have these kinds of conversations and say, that's not appropriate. Why are you doing that? Are you aware that that could be harmful? We don't notice red flags. We're so busy minding our own business. Something's definitely got to change. And you're right, it's everywhere in the world. But in a country like South Africa, where the unemployment rate is so high, it does create other issues, where higher rates of exploitation, where people feel like they can do things, and the possibility, the potential of getting away with it is greater because people are so desperate not to get into trouble, not to lose their jobs. You're a senior. And these two, the first female that came out, both of them, in fact, so brave, because I can only imagine what sort of courage that took. You're still a trainee. You don't even know if you're going to qualify. This could prevent that. This could, certainly there have been cases of corruption in organizations and departments. So this has taken a lot of courage. Let's discuss our thoughts about President Ramaphosa using resources to visit the White House to try to convince Trump, the American president, of the misinformation regarding white farmer genocide, when our women and children are being massacred in South Africa on a daily basis. Not even to mention the war zone that is the Cape Flats, where people are, on average, 20 of our youth are being gunned down on a daily basis. That's not even the unreported cases, females going missing, and everything else. What are your thoughts about that?
I have a lot of thoughts about that. I think President Cyril Ramaphosa, using the national resources to visit the White House, aiming to counteract some narratives that are going on at the moment, as what was described as, I think it was the white farmer genocide at one stage. It was classed as that. That move, regardless of the intention, for me, it raised serious questions for many South Africans. Why are we so quick to defend the global image when here at home we're so slow to defend our own women and children? That, because let's be clear, the narrative control and international relations, they do matter. But what message is he sending when he prioritizes global perception over urgent, I would say really urgent domestic issues? I mean, if we look at the case of Quick, and I know we weren't really going to discuss that, but there was such a huge support for her and her family. And, in that case, I know many, many other leaders around the world speak openly about ongoing cases. And they address the nation and say that this is wrong and it cannot go on, and these are some of the measures that they're going to put in place. But not once have I seen him in a leadership capacity come forward and say something about these atrocities being held to children, done to children and women. And I think that is what true leadership calls for, is having a balance between looking at international matters, but also looking at what is going on at home, on your very doorstep, and addressing those, letting the people know that this cannot go on. We see you and we hear you as your leaders. So I definitely think that he needs to step up more, because I think it's time that we challenge the leadership culture globally. We need more than speeches. We need more than, big talks and niceties. We need urgent, well-funded, community-driven responses. And that is what I would like to see more of our global leaders step up and do, and actually speak to those matters, because it's high time.
Yeah. Well, to me, my big question is, where's the money? When South Africa is a rich country, where are resources going? Is there a mismanagement of funds? Why is it? Because I know in that meeting there was a lot of appealing to getting help from the American government to help us with our crime. Why are we not able to do that? Why do we not have proper sectors within each police station set up who are trained and equipped to be able to deal with gender-based violence and violence of this type? We don't have rape kits. We should have doctors or nurses, healthcare professionals who are able to do those tests immediately when you get there, so that DNA doesn't get corrupted, and everything. The process just seems to be so lengthy, and especially with sexually motivated crimes, the process just seems to be so lengthy. How come our police stations are not set up with the right training, the right the departments that can vet and with the kind of therapy and processes in place so that they can recognize if somebody might be a red flag, or there might be behavioral issues, or therapy might be needed, to be able to evaluate and assess these people. And then the department there that is equipped to be able to take statements and to take follow the correct procedures to make sure that the integrity of the case and the victim and what happens all being protected. Where is all the money going? So that's the first question. And the second thing that's bizarre to me is this small group of people who clearly believe that they're being targeted because they're farmers and they're white. And by now, that myth has been debunked. We know that that is not true. There is no white genocide, but there are clearly some people that believe that they are being targeted, and I don't know if that's because they have an inflated sense of importance, like the whole world and everything that's happening must just revolve around them, or if it's because they were the privileged, spoiled, special child and now they're not anymore and they're struggling with that. Do they not see or hear or know of all the crime that's taking place in the country around them? Now, this is an important point, because when you live separated from the real world, the real South Africa that the majority of South Africans and people of color live in, you don't realize how much crime there is out there. So when there's one family that experiences something terrible, it's a big deal to you, because in your little world, you are very protected. You are protected by privilege. Your life is a lot more comfortable than everybody else. People in townships who on a daily basis is faced with crime. And so there is an ignorance to the plight of ordinary and the majority of South Africans, especially and particularly from the privileged. The thing that I can sort of understand wanting to set things straight, where misinformation is being spread about South Africa, those agendas can certainly become a very, very big problem. People, especially people who are lazy, tend to believe whatever they hear. So I can see how that is important, but in the face of the issues we have here, having to take resources to make this trip to appease this obviously ignorant man who is not interested in anything other than what he's decided is true. That's a conversation on its own. That's a subject on its own. And stating openly for everyone to see, we don't have the resources. And then having all these people speaking on behalf of the citizens of South Africa, the everyday people. And they are not people who live that reality. They're not.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think you make a valid point there, because I just think that, this speaks to psychological colonialism. And that's why the South African government actually scrambled to defend its image in the West. If you think about it, there is still a need for the government. He could have written to Donald Trump and said, look, this is where we're at. We've actually got a national crisis on our hands at the moment. But to go there, it just speaks to, why was resources spent on managing the reputation of the country while the gender-based, for example, shelters are underfunded and rape kits go untested. It's just, if you look at it from that perspective, there is such a huge imbalance. Like, what's going on there? And it just shows that, psychological colonialism is still a thing. It's a system of mental control, and it still dictates what certain people value and who we protect, and which lives are seen as newsworthy and which are not. So Yeah, I was really shocked. I thought he might write to when I heard of the initial meetings being proposed. I thought he might write to President Trump instead of actually going there physically, because it was only him. It was a team of people that went along with him, and that must have cost extra funds. That money could have easily been redirected back into the country, and like you said, what is so needed, put where it is so needed, like rape kits and setting up gender-based violence shelters. But yeah, I think that is a huge amount of money that could have been spent somewhere else.
Yeah. So a comment that I came across when I was when I saw a post about this particular case where the police spokesperson was talking about this assault committed by this captain. One of the comments that stood out to me was from someone called a gentleman called Gifted, and Gifted's comment said, "But deep down, we know he did not force her. They made a deal." So we were talking about the mentality
Mm.
of men as a whole. I want to zoom into the mentality of people, of the everyday South African and South Africans in general. I feel like misogyny is almost built into our culture, that me personally, as a mother of boys, I would have to call out when people make certain statements, would say certain things to my son while his mind is still fragile. I say, no, 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 that's nonsense. That's not really what, or I'd have to call him aside and say, ignore what Aunt so-and-so or Uncle so-and-so said. That's how they see the world, but that's not true. That's not healthy. That's not right. And I'd have to teach. So you're surrounded by, it takes a village to raise a child, and then you've got a whole lot of people who are indoctrinated and have been raised with these misogynistic mindsets and this culture that is normalized, and they grew up with it, they don't challenge it, and then they just perpetuate and become that. Like the stuff that South African men say, the way that they behave, the things that they do, not all, but predominantly it's very predominant. So I see that in this comment.
Wow. I think if I think of growing up in South Africa, there was definitely, a huge sense, like you said, misogyny and also patriarchal masculinity. And I think that is still very prevalent because from a young age, boys are often taught to be a man. We hear things like, big men don't cry or boys don't cry. They're taught to be in control of women, of outcomes, of emotions, and in some communities, still across the world again, hitting a partner or disciplining a woman, it's still acceptable or even expected.
Yeah, but hitting and disciplining children because I love you and you did something wrong, that's where it begins. And a lot
Yes,
of people
yeah,
still don't want to accept that.
yeah,
Um, Also, in households, most of the chores and the responsibilities are given to the females.
yeah,
Men
absolutely.
get away with doing very little. They're favored just because they are male. When something goes wrong, the blame automatically leans towards the female. It's just,
Absolutely.
and it's something we're going to have to change. We have to be willing to acknowledge that the way that society is set up, the way that we're a very violent nation, and there's so many different factors, so many different historical factors and current factors that contribute to that. But we've
Yeah,
got to be willing to look at the impact that our history and our systems have had on how we run our households, how our parents and our grandparents ran their households, and then how that's impacted how we raise our children. And until we're willing to acknowledge that it didn't work, people will still have the conversation. Things are so bad now because in our day we got hiding. No, things are bad now because they were even worse in your day. If they were good in your day, they would be better now because things progress. Momentum is added. So if I'm going south, are you going to say, oh, that's why you woke up in the east because we were going south, but you're going east? No, you must have been going east if I'm in the deep east now. You must have been going south if we're in the deep south. You can't say you were digging up to the heavens if now we're at the crust of the earth.
Absolutely.
So,
I think that comment, it just speaks to, you remember we used to have a saying back in the day, I don't know if it's still around, boys will be boys. That sounds a lot like, she provoked him. Or I heard the other day someone said, a man needs to show her who's the boss. I heard it on a movie or somewhere. And I thought to myself, wow, those little comments, they all try and normalize abusive behavior because that's not on. A woman doesn't need to be shown who's the boss. She could be the boss as well. So yeah, that is definitely a shocking statement that person has made.
I'm not surprised, Ruth. The reality is that most men think women are just gold diggers because they think they use. I think that there is a sense amongst some communities of being unable to provide, and so they blame their circumstances and their lack of well-being in relationships on the fact that not I am unable to provide for myself and the people I love, but rather I'm not good enough because she's a gold digger, So that this conversation has so much depth. But let me move on to case number 2, where we talk about Olorato Mongale, 30-year-old Wits University journalist student. Her lifeless body was found by community members in Lombardy West, Johannesburg, on the 25th of May this year, 2025. She was last seen 2 hours earlier around 3 p.m. when she left her home in Athol with a man she planned to go on a date with. She agreed to share her location with friends every 30 minutes and told them that if she misses the 30-minute mark, that they should call. When concerned friends were unable to reach Olorato after not hearing from her for an hour, they used the Find My Phone feature, which led them to a site in Bramley, where her phone and other belongings had been dumped. Olorato's family opened a missing persons case at Bramley's police station at approximately 6 p.m. on that day. However, the police only initiated the search shortly after midnight, citing a lack of available vehicles. Apparently, the station only had one functioning vehicle that day. Let that sink in. Meanwhile, community members had already started their own search at around 5 p.m., shockingly. At approximately 2 a.m., Bramley police were informed that the lifeless body of a woman was found by the community. Olorato's family was only able to identify her body the following morning. A manhunt has been underway for a suspect known only as John, who is believed to be involved in Olorato's murder, because this was the John she was talking about and telling her friends about. And apparently, according to the police spokesperson, the friend was crucial with providing information. Okay. So this John was last seen in a white VW Polo bearing the cloned number plate, which is registered to a Toyota Hilux. So the number plate didn't actually belong to the vehicle. They had footage from the complex where he had picked her up, and he reversed into the complex. He didn't come in with his front, with the front of the vehicle. There are talks there, and there were talks amongst citizens about suspicions of a possible serial killer, because different people started to come forward with their stories about this John and potential dates, and talks of similar crimes in the surrounding area, as well as other women who have had encounters with John, sort of started to surface. So that was people's wondered and started to suspect, could he be a serial killer? The vehicle allegedly used in Olorato's murder has been found at a panel beaters in Phoenix after this, right? Phoenix in Durban. Police intelligence led them to one of the suspected houses in Kwamashu Tegweni, but the car was found in Phoenix with traces of blood. And then that man, who was believed to be the owner of the VW Polo, was arrested. Thereafter, two men, Fezile Nkubani and Filangenkosi Makanya, believed to be Olorato's murderers, were on the run. So obviously, once they arrested this man who was believed to be the owner of the VW Polo, they started to gain more information. And the owner of the VW Polo is Filangenkosi's father. Okay, so he was using his father's car. But they were on the run. Police then asked the public for any information that would lead to apprehending these men, but warned that they were dangerous and should not be approached. Okay. It was disclosed that the men were out on bail after being apprehended for a similar incident where a woman was found to be held captive in the vehicle with these men during an attempted robbery. So at the time of Olorato's murder, these two men had been let out on bail. Police have made a statement about a syndicate operating in and around Joburg. Apparently, these men approached women in shopping mall centers and lured them with the guise of a potential relationship in order to invite them out on dates and then rob them. So initially, there were talks of potential serial killers because there were so many people who had had encounters. But then the investigation led them to realize that it's a syndicate. Another man had been tied to the case as a third suspect and was named Bongani Timkulu. The main suspect was shot and killed after the police investigation had led to a man's apartment. Allegedly, Filangenkosi came to the man's place to rent a vehicle, which he had done on occasions in the past. So he would rent vehicles from this man and use them possibly in what I would assume in his crimes. But this man did not give him a car because he had seen his profile in the news. Obviously, with all of the news coverage and the information going around about Olorato, he was aware of the fact that this man was wanted. According to the man, he asked Filangenkosi what happened, and apparently he spent the entire day with him, confessing to what happened in Joburg, telling him about it. According to the detective, he told the man that he didn't want to turn himself into the police and he wanted to kill himself. They spent the entire day together, and apparently he even locked Filangenkosi in the house when he went to the shop to buy food, came back, fed him, and spent most of the day, according to this man, counseling and praying for him. He's some sort of evangelist until the police arrived in the evening. I'm curious about this because if he was there during the day, the man knew about him. kept him there. I'm not sure when he let the police know, but I'm assuming it's at the very least when he went to the shop. Why do they arrive there in the evening? What if, because
Mm.
I mean, he locked him in the house and everything. He decided to stay there knowing that this man knows what had happened and the man's trying to convince him to hand himself over. The police could have lost him. He could have disappeared. He could have attacked this man, stolen one of his vehicles, and he could have disappeared. Yeah. In the evening, when the police arrived, there was a shootout between him and the police, and he was shot dead during this shootout. At this very same complex in Amanzimtoti, Durban. After hearing about the manhunt for these suspects, the real Fezile Nkubani turned himself into the police and was subsequently cleared as a suspect. He had sold his identity to the man for 500 Rand and realized that this could lead to him losing his life. So, Fezile, the perpetrator, the suspect that went by the name of Fezile, was using a fake ID. And this man who was cleared by the police did an interview, and he was talking about the fact that he hasn't left Durban in 15 years. His lifestyle of being gripped by drugs had led him to making compromising decisions where he sold his identity with the promise of receiving 500 Rand a month. So he now realized that he made a very big mistake and his lifestyle has led him to this place, but he's never harmed anyone. And he did a complete interview. But it makes me think about how many people's IDs could they also have been using? What sort of names could they have been going by? Getting to know people is a risk. Like dating apps and how can we navigate the dating scene these days, because this syndicate, it is believed that they would approach women in shopping centers and malls under the guise of being interested in a relationship, chatting to them for some time, grooming them in a sense, and then asking them out on a date with the motive of robbery. How can we navigate the dating scene these days? I think about Ruth when we were younger, it was customary. I thought to myself, has life just become more dangerous? Was it always dangerous? For us, it was always dangerous. We grew up on the flats. We grew up in the ghettos. So going out in our day was when you were given permission and the guy had to come and meet the family first. He wasn't
Oh,
just
yeah.
allowed to go out. He had to meet the family. And obviously, these are their challenges depending on your family, especially if you've got a family with issues that are, you've got other things to deal with. But the point is, in those days, the gentleman had to meet your family, he had to come and visit you at home during decent hours, sit in the lounge with you and have conversations. Once the family got to know who he is and knew where he lives and his family, then he was able to take you out. And you didn't leave home and go and live on your own until you were married. So it was sort of like, we take care of you. And when you have a husband that now takes over and takes care of you, then we let you go because someone else is now saying, I'm going to take care of her. So that's how it was before. And the time that we live in now, obviously, the world's become smaller. We're able to meet people from different parts of the world. There were comments about why did she just go out with a stranger? To my knowledge, Olorato did all the right things. She, it wasn't the first time she saw him. She met him at the center. He then came, they spoke for a while, and she was going out on a date, according to her knowledge. She told her friends that she'll check in with her location every 30 minutes. And again, a syndicate is this is a group of people who have come together, collaborated for the purpose of crime, for robbery, you know, to get money.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure. We'll find out in the when this case goes to court what happened, why they killed her. Did they not want her to
Mm,
speak?
mm.
Did she fight
That was
back?
one of the things. That was one of the things that stood out for me. It was like, if this was a date gone wrong or a robbery, why did it end in murder? And I'm quite interested to see that. Um, and like you said, it is a deliberate action to prey on women who are just looking for a connection. Um, and it seems like an easy way to meet people. Which raises, obviously, that this is such a risk, because getting to know someone in today's world, it's definitely a risk. But she did all the right things. She let her friends know where she was going. And she said, call me. She did all the right things, and still this ended really badly for her. So I love you in that, or your playback. Our communities took care of us back in the day, and we boys or men were vetted by your family. And maybe that's something that we need to go back to, before meeting someone, because online dating, you have no idea who the person is. But it is part of the culture today.
Yeah.
Something that you touched on there, Eva, the community taking initiative, that stood out for me, because this is not only with Olarato's case. We've seen it with Jaden Lee Meek, who was an 11-year-old boy that they also found, who was allegedly assaulted and then found murdered on the steps where he lives in a block of flats. And that just again speaks to the South African police services. I thought that's just worth mentioning, because we see more and more communities coming forward and taking that initiative when they know that, someone's not arrived on time, like in Jaden's case, and Olorato as well. Where is she? So you mentioned that there was not enough resources at the police station. And it's just, it's mind-boggling to see the community coming forward. It's a really great thing, but this is something that needs to be addressed. The South African police services, where are the resources? Why wasn't there enough resources? And like we spoke about the money earlier, is what is broken in the system? Why is there not being enough money allocated to these resources? And these are critical resources. This is what makes communities work. We need police services, we need hospitals, we need care, we need rape kits, we need tools to address this gender-based violence. So, yes, going back to the syndicate, I think that this was definitely a deliberate action to prey on the most vulnerable women just looking for a connection, a date, companionship. And unfortunately for Olorato, it didn't end well. Yeah, it's really tragic, because I had a look at one video on YouTube. She was 30 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. And it just feels like she was robbed of such a bright future. And the photos of her, she had on a lovely pink suit, I think, in one of them. So she was really living life. And yeah, it's unfortunate that, she met with an untimely death.
And just to go back to the case about Jaden Smith, we definitely want to cover that in some more detail, because there are a couple of important things to highlight and bring awareness to. His story deserves to be told as well. It seems to have gone quiet. The community coming out feeling like we've got to stand together and support one another is a beautiful thing, but it does present challenges because crime scenes are contaminated. We don't know. We're not equipped. What are there needs to be more awareness around and training provided to community, because everybody there was well intended, but not having no sensitivity that entire apartment is a crime scene. And I suppose feeling so desperate because there's enough time for people to get away with things, to clear up, to wash down, to do whatever. When the community feels so helpless that they feel they've got to do the job, it can create more issues than anything else. That is why we have tax money going towards organization that is supposed to be trained and equipped to be able to do this kind of work for us. And again, I say in Olorato's case, she did all the right things. So it is a tragedy. It is a tragedy. And at the same time, for me, it's a tragedy that she lost her life at the hands of these people who, for whatever reason, was desperate enough, deluded enough to decide to come together and come up with this elaborate plan where they see there is a space for exploitation and they'll target the vulnerable and rob them. Her life was lost. And we don't even know for what and for how much money. Surely it wasn't millions. So there are so many problems that contribute towards this type of thing. The bail. These two men were caught. It's as if the universe held them to the police on a platter because they were parked, they were stationed somewhere. It looked strange. And a police van went up to them. I don't know if someone reported it. They went to ask what's going on. And this woman was on the back seat, and they discovered that she was in the car because she'd been kidnapped, and she was in the vehicle because she was being robbed. They were arrested for that. They were let out on bail. So Olorato's murder could have been prevented as well. Are our laws too relaxed? Considering how terrible the crime is, our laws don't seem to match. It just doesn't seem to weigh up. So I want to talk to you about some of the comments, Ruth, that I came across on some of the videos, some of the content that was provided around her case. Enkle said they met in Bloem, ? He drove to Sandton for the first date, ? Then drove to KZN. The story is so strange. Why did they target her specifically? So like you were saying earlier on, for a date, it did seem strange. She left for a date around 3, and 1 hour later, because she wasn't answering her phone anymore. So this happened very, very quickly. It didn't make sense not for a date. Like, that's a little bit of time for anything to, not a lot seems to have been able to happen in that short period of time. And so that's where this statement stood out to me. This was before the main suspect was apprehended and shot to death. The questions and the theory around the date just didn't make sense. So it definitely stood out that there's something bigger going on here, because why would you meet in Bloemfontein, drive all the way to Sandton for a first date, and then he ends up in KZN? All right. So obviously, now that we know this was a syndicate, these people travel from Durban to go commit these crimes in Johannesburg. Johannesburg, when I lived in Joburg, it just seemed like the perfect place to commit crimes because people could just disappear there so easily. And I don't know if that's why they did it, but I suppose we'll find out more in the during the trial. And then there's I don't know if you want to say anything on that, Ruth, before I move on to the next comment.
No, I totally agree with, the different cities, etc. I can't wait for the trial just to see all what comes out and why this occurred. I think a lot of people are asking that question, why did this happen? And from having a normal date to, that ending that she had, what happened in between that led to
Yeah.
that? I think we're all waiting for that information.
Well, to me, it seems clear. To me, it seems obvious. There was never meant to be a date. It was that it does make sense to me. Obviously, different facts can come out during the trial, but it does make sense to me that this was for the motive of robbery, for money, for
Mm, mm,
and something happened that led to murder. The main suspect was so adamant not to go back to jail that he had a shootout with the police. And I think maybe that's why she was killed. You don't want to go back to jail.
mm.
Then there is Syndicate 3 that said, nah, the real John is still out there. Chances are, after she was killed, the car was abandoned and two Kwamashu guys stole an abandoned Polo. Not knowing it's wanted, Phoenix could be the real owner, which might be stolen from him unless they all work together. So this was under a comment where there was still discussion around the date and maybe he's a serial killer. So he was sort of saying, the person that killed her is still out there. And the interesting thing is the John that was described doesn't look like any of these two guys. So
Mm, mm.
I think there's another guy. This John guy was described as an older, a mature, light-skinned man. He might be part of the syndicate.
Yeah.
He might be the initial person that approaches, and then they're the ones that do the robbing. But so Zimkit knew something didn't make sense here. Like there's more going on. And then the matriarch 03 said, I think ladies need to start insisting on taking pics of the man date before going on a date with them and send it to friends and family. If he refuses for his pic to be taken, then you know that he's hiding something. What do you think of that?
I think that's an interesting point. It could potentially work, but then there's always, people use fake profiles often. They use fake pictures. You meet John and you end up dating Paul, or there's so many variables around that. And people like using other people's pictures as well. And I think even in the case with Olorato, she did everything according to the book. She let her people know where she was, and things still ended badly for her. So I don't have pics of the man unless you take a friend with you, maybe. I don't know if that's going to work. Um,
I was thinking maybe what needs to happen is we need to have speed dating events, like dating events where where the guys and the girls are vetted, and you don't date because the dating sites are a cesspool. I'm telling you, because there are so many scammers. There's a lot to sift and sort through very carefully. There, it's a lot of work. I understand the desperation for trying to figure out ways that we can protect ourselves but the sad reality is if it's so easy, if there are so many motivating factors for crime, we're the easy target, we're the vulnerable ones as women. That's what needs to change, you know. It shouldn't be so easy. People shouldn't just be let out on bail. Things shouldn't be so detrimental. Addiction and poverty and unemployment shouldn't be so detrimental that people are willing to, or so rife that people are willing to kill you for 500 rand. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very, very sad. The beautiful thing, though, is, and I did see a comment where someone said Olorato's ancestors are very powerful because things were moving quickly. Sometimes this happens. I wish it was the case for all cases. I think that
Mm.
some people have more access to resources. Some cases, um, in this case, it wasn't a matter of, oh, the police acted so fast. It was the community. Her body would probably have been lying there much longer if it wasn't for the community. But in this case, things did seem to move quite quickly. And we just, yeah, beautiful soul. Like you say, she had so much ahead of her. And it is a tragedy.
But it
Okay.
definitely it raises those questions. How can you navigate the dating scene safely and consciously? I think that is one of the biggest takeaways from this case. And educating women on how to do that. I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest things is don't ignore your intuition or listen to your intuition. And if something feels off, I think listening to that instinct, don't second guess yourself if something feels off. Um, I know someone said to me a while back, go and do a Google check on someone. I don't know if that works because, like you said, there's so much scamming out there. Um, and she did arrange her first date was to meet in public. First dates being in public, I think that's a big one. Um, but how do you do that? I don't know. What are your thoughts, Ela? How can we navigate dating safely and consciously?
I think maybe dating events would be good. I think if we start to um, build our social lives around creating safe spaces, that might be nice. But honestly, these kinds of crimes happen in all kinds of situations. It's a challenging thing. And if I look at all the cases and the motives behind some of these cases, some motives we don't even know.
Mm.
The way that things look, it seems to me that the only way you can stay safe or avoid ever being attacked is to not date, is to stay away from men, is
Mm.
to
Mm.
what was that movement that was started in Korea? It was actually a movement where women decided they're not going to date, they're not going to have sex with men, and they're not going to procreate because men don't know how to treat them. They are not deserving of their time and their energy. We've got to set higher standards. For example, so many guys are the ones who dictate the dates and how things are going to happen. And sometimes there's this, if I'm too high maintenance, then no one's going to want to get to know
Mm.
me. I think it's
Mm.
okay to have high standards. And I don't know if this is going to, how anybody will feel about this, but as a psychic medium, I say get a reading from a reputable reader. I have clients coming to me saying, there's this person talking to me, interested in me, please do a reading. I'll say, this is how this is going to end. This is not your person. Don't waste your time. This person's dangerous, whatever. You can get a reading. If that's something, if you're
Mm.
in those circles, if otherwise, obviously there's the fear that you're going to get scammed because there are scammers,
Mm.
people pretend to be readers. So you go to someone that you know is a referral. Someone's been to them. They're reputable. And you can skip a lot of unwanted experiences just by doing that one thing, is get a reading. Or if you're in a place where you notice you keep attracting red flags, you keep getting yourself into dodgy situations with relationships, it's a good indication that it's time for you to develop the relationship with yourself. Be single. Your relationships with your girlfriends and your guy friends, and see them in groups together. And if somebody behaves in a way that dishonors you or that you don't quite like, don't put up with it. Separate from them. Don't hold on to friendships and people just because, well, if a guy shows disrespect to females or a woman is messy, it's okay to cancel people from your life. Let them move on. Yeah, that's, to me, I that was the that's the best advice I can give. It's not necessarily what anyone wants to hear. People want to date, people
Mm.
want to have fun.
Mm.
But you would, when you're in a particular place, and I know when I was in a place of conflict with myself, when I was in a place of being very traumatized, and I attracted a lot of obsessive, controlling types of men. And
Absolutely.
I was able to heal that by staying single for 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. And I think that's so, so important. Dating safely, it also means doing the inner work, like you said, and knowing your worth, setting that boundaries, and being clear about your values and expectations. And if someone doesn't meet that, you don't have to go on a second date. And listening to your intuition, I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Because we attract people based on what we are. That is the bottom line, like you said now. So, but we also repel those that doesn't meet us at that place. So,
Yeah.
doing the inner work, I definitely agree with you, Ira. But it's not always easy. People like connection, but if you spend time with yourself,
But sometimes
yeah,
the connection is strong and it's exciting. The attraction is
yeah,
a wound attracting another wound. I don't want to risk invalidating or victim blaming. It takes getting to a particular place to understand and to be able to listen to your guidance system, your intuition. Some people's intuition is not safe because they think that their wounds and their fears are their intuition. So people are trying to figure out practical ways that everybody, regardless of where they are, can take good care of themselves. And the reality is that we have a lot of people out here trying to take care of themselves to the best of their ability, but we have a system that makes it so easy, that almost encourages crime, because we don't have systems in place for recovery. We've got a lot of traumatized people in poverty coming. It's systemic, and the support, the healing is a fraction of what is needed. So you've got a lot of people slipping through the cracks. And we've got a lot of people literally slipping through the cracks because we have so many problems. And so, for the purpose of the general conversation, I think that the best thing to do when advocating for these cases for people of all ages, from all walks of life, is to keep highlighting the fact that more resources, more attention needs to be given to the systems that have been put in place, are meant to be in place to keep us safe. Our communities cannot continue to be war zones, and we expect healthy people to come from those areas. Our communities cannot keep housing or not housing single parents who have no support, who can't even get the courts to make their fathers pay child support. I'm one of those. I walked to court back and forth, took off work where I'm losing money to try and get a father to pay maintenance. And then there were women in their 50s standing in this long queue with me all morning and saying, so I have to come back here all the time because I do the work, the legwork, something gets put in place, he pays one payment and then he defaults. Then the process starts over for me. It's no use having laws if people are not implementing them. There's a mismanagement when it comes to implementation. When I was on the South Coast, I needed to get a restraining order from my landlord who was harassing me and doing all sorts of things. Took a day off work and I was being paid commission, which means I lose a day's salary. And in this country, taking off a day's work, it's worse. It's like you're committing the worst crime. If you're sick and you come to work, you're the best person. Taking a day of work, you must rather rape someone. I always used to say that. And it sounds like an awful joke, but it's the truth. Okay? So it's just all messed up. And there are so many factors that contribute. So I was waiting to get a restraining order. And guess what? There were women sitting there that had come the day before and the day before. They have to travel from townships. So they have to get money for transport. They come and sit there all day to try and get a restraining order because they're afraid for their lives. Then at the end of the day, so they're told to wait. We're sitting there waiting. Where's the person? They don't know. Oh, out on lunch. The shift was over. The person never came back from lunch. The shift was over. Come back tomorrow. He'll be here. I said, don't you know where your staff is? So this person can go or leave for the day and go to the casino, go have drinks, go out for lunch, just decide I'm taking the day off. Nobody knows where they are. And this is the person that is responsible for helping women be safe. We can go home and be dead. And this person is going to get paid their salary and life is just merrily going to go on. Those are the realities, especially amongst the majority, right? Which are the minorities in this country, the poor people. The people of color, the blacks of South Africa, the black people of South Africa. You're just not recognized. You don't matter. Your life doesn't matter. So those are the realities, and staying in the house doesn't keep you safe because it's your father, it's your mother, it's your brother, it's your cousin. Walking to the shop is not safe. Going to work is not safe. So many single mothers, so many women in this country who don't have men that are in their households that they can rely on. So many grandmothers still supporting their adult men because they're addicts or they can't get jobs or whatever. Going to work is a risk here. It's not even just about dating. So it's a bigger conversation. Case number 3 that I wanted to talk to you guys about this evening is 25-year-old Amberly Hughes. A preschool teacher is accused of committing sexual assault and taking the life of her boyfriend's 4-year-old little girl, Nada Jane Shalita. The child had been left in Hughes's care while her father was out of town for work. Amber faces charges of these heinous crimes, 2 counts of rape and 1 for allegedly murdering her boyfriend, at the time Ellie's daughter, Nada Jane, in January 2023. Horrific. She's accused of slitting the child's wrists and then drowning her in the bathtub of their Glenbista home that she shared with Ellie and Nada Jane. Hughes was in a relationship with Nada Jane's father, who she had accused of infidelity before the child's death. Okay. According to reports, on the day of the incident, Amber Lee and Nada Jane's father had been fighting all day whilst he was away on a work trip. Apparently, she admits to believing that he had scheduled appointments with sex workers, but claims that she was not angry about it. Imagine that. She admits that she thought he'd scheduled appointments with sex workers, but she also claims in court she wasn't angry. It's going to be hard pressed for me to believe someone after saying that. After lengthy delays The case finally made it into court during March this year. So this happened in 2023, and the case made it to court this year. Amber strongly denies the charges and claims that she walked in on the little girl with her face. She claims that she walked in on the little girl with her face down in the water. In Amber's plea explanation, Amber claimed that she tripped and injured herself whilst the child was playing in the bathtub. She said she went to clean herself up, and when she returned, Nada Jane was unresponsive, suggesting the child may have fallen or slipped in the intervening period. That she tried to lift her out of the bathtub, but the 15 kg little girl was apparently too heavy for her to move. So she got into the bath instead, and that she left her on the seat of the bathtub and ran to get her phone. But while she was running, she claims that she slipped over her wet pants, her wet trousers, and decided to remove them. She then called the emergency services, but after having to deal with too many robotic options and prompts, she decided to drop the call and called her dad, telling him, and I quote, "I was crying. I told my dad, please help. Nada needs help," end quote. She didn't call anyone else. Ellie's friend arrived at the house to help after Ellie's frantic call to him. And I wondered how the friend arrived there, but Ellie called his friend after receiving a threatening message from Hughes. So he's in there texting and they're fighting back and forth. He received a threatening message from her. This alarmed him and he called his friend frantically to ask, please go and check up. Amber Hughes claims to have had a special bond with the little girl, making statements like, and I quote, "Nada was my everything, my best friend. I was like a mother to her, and she was like my own child," end quote. She keeps emphasizing in her cross-examination how special her relationship was with Nada Jane. She even goes so far as to say, "I fell in love with Nada Jane first and then her father." So it's as if she's implying that she was with him because she loved because of a bond with the little girl. She was her preschool teacher before they started dating. Okay. She continues to deny allegations that she had drowned the child in the bathtub. And on the stand, she would also vehemently deny the charges of rape with a foreign object. And Hughes claims that her only mistake was that she did not check in on the child more regularly, claiming that she had left Nada Jane alone in the tub for 20 minutes. Think about that. You're a mom, I'm a mom.
No way. I wouldn't leave my child in the tub for 5 minutes. I would be sitting with him. For 20 minutes, that's questionable.
There are claims of toxicity in the relationship between Amber Hughes and Ellie. And apparently they had split approximately 10 times before reconciling. So they would split up and get back together over and over. Amber denies claims of being violent or aggressive in the arguments. And with regards to the brutal treatment against the little girl, it seems harder for her to deny on the stand that she had apparently threatened her life. Okay, because of the text that was sent. However, she says that the reason why she threatened her life, she goes on to state that it was only in August of 2022 when Ellie had apparently threatened her life to her father. during a fight between the couple. Amber admits to saying something along the lines, "If you ever want to see your daughter alive, come get her." So to my knowledge, she was at her father's. The couple was arguing back and forth. The child was in her care at the time while she was at her father's. And whilst they were arguing back and forth, she claims that he threatened to take Amber's life to Amber's father. And Amber retaliated because she says she was angry by saying, "If you ever want to see your daughter alive, come get her." In that moment, she had apparently retaliated in anger, saying, "I will end you and your child." If an adult threatens to hurt a child, believe that. She also stated that on the day the little girl had been lying in her arms with her hands under Amber's shirt, which was apparently her safe space. I'm uncomfortable with this statement. Another strange statement from Amber was that the gardener was at the house on the day and had keys to the gate and house. But this was proven untrue by the prosecutors. So once again, you're seeing here this narrative of it must be the black person, it must be the poor gardener.
Yeah.
According to News 24, the case went into its second day in court on Tuesday, 15th April. Forensic pathologist Dr. Hestel van Staden, who performed the post-mortem on the child, was called to the stand to testify. Van Staden said she had noticed abrasions and bruising on Nada Jane's head, but that these were not consistent with the kind of fall she would have taken to render her unconscious. When asked by the judge, Richard Macabela, if she was able to give an opinion on whether Nada Jane could have drowned herself, she further said, "If this child fell and hit her head, because that's sometimes the history we do get, I would have expected to see injuries consistent with that fall and hitting of the head. In my opinion, it doesn't fit with the child having drowned herself in the bath. A child of 4 is usually able to swim, able to sit up straight. There is no evidence of any underlying natural pathology that would have made her drown." Van Staden also stated that it was not the first time that the child had been abused. She testified that injuries suffered by the child showed she had been assaulted in the minutes or hours leading up to her death, but that it was not a single event and had happened over a period of time. However, when pressed by Huge's counsel, Advocate Michelle Ives, Van Staden conceded that it was not impossible. It's not impossible, but at the same time, it does seem quite unlikely to me. You know, on the day of Nada Jane's death, Chalita and Huges got into a fight over text, and he became concerned after receiving a message from her that read. So you know the previous fight they had, she threatened the child's life and said, "Come and get the child." And on this day, the day of the child's, this precious little girl losing her life, she sent him a message that read, and I quote, "You broke my heart. I'm going to burn yours. How could you do that to me?" This was the alarming message that made him call his friend and said, "Please go and check up on her." So what happened was the friend then, Amber, allegedly finds Nada Jane head down in the bath, can't lift her out, allegedly, climbs into the bath with her. To me, it sounds like she needed to have an excuse for why her trousers were off and why they were wet. then climbs out, runs to get a phone, but falls over her trousers. Normally, when your trousers are wet, they stick to you.
Mm.
Have you fallen over your wet trousers? I haven't. I don't. It's possible, but to me, nonetheless, she doesn't call emergency services. She says she did, okay, but she says too many prompts. It might be true. I do think, like for us, we don't just have the 911 where we go straight to 911. We got the 10 111, then we've got to say what we're calling for. Then they patch you through to this or patch you through to that. It is a bit much. We should just have with our crime rate, we should just have a direct, this is what's happening, and help is, and they're sending help, But she ends the call because to her, it's too many robotic prompts, and she calls her dad. She doesn't say specifically what happened. She doesn't say the child is drowned. She says she needs help. And in the meantime, Ellie, Nada Jane's father, called his friend and said frantically, he knew something was wrong, go and check up on her. So his friend arrives to the house, finds the child in the bar, and then takes action. Rushes the child to hospital, because in South Africa, phoning the ambulance is going to be a problem. We know that, right? They take very long to come. We heard about the police that there's one car and then they make you wait until whatever. So he rushes the child, and she's to hospital where she's pronounced dead.
Mm-hmm.
Amber Hughes denies fervently that she had anything to do with the child's death. But I want to go through the comments with you once you've given me your take on this, because when you watch her interviews, it's very telling to me.
Mm-hmm. I think I want to start with something that you mentioned, Edith. If I can just go back to the notes here. You mentioned something about, I'm just trying to find it, but it was something about the little girl laying in her arms or under her shirt, which was apparently her safe space, something to that. That just really struck out to me, because to me it sounds like who's to say what someone's safe space is? But there's so many things going on here. But if I just take, for example, I just want to look at Amber's behavior. That reveals something deeper than just the crime. To me, it reveals a psychological pattern that is familiar in many, many abusive dynamics, which is narcissistic control. And there's a lot of manipulation going on here, emotional manipulation. You can see through some of the texts, and a total disregard for the well-being of others, especially the little girl. I think we just need to take a look at that. Her behavior, it seems erratic. She goes in and out, saying she deeply cares for this child. And when I look at the story as a whole, it seems like there's such a toxic foundation here, because there's a history of Amber Lee being very abusive with the father, threatening him. And those are all red flags. I don't know if she was mad on the date, but that text was really telling. And good on the father for actually listening to his intuition.
Sorry, Ruth. They did say, it has been stated that they'd been arguing back and forth the entire day. She was accusing him of infidelity, of that he booked scheduled appointments with sex workers. So she was accusing him of buying sex, in other words. So there was this she was definitely, that was what the argument was about, apparently.
And I think even there, when say for example the two of us have an argument, again, your behavior, it just does not escalate in the way that it did here. A healthy person's behavior does not escalate in the way that Amber did. There's an absence of empathy here. It just looks like she fires off at certain times. And the consequences obviously escalated really quickly here. What
Well,
really,
according to her, any of this, and all of this is still alleged, right? But this is your and my opinion. This is your and my opinion. In her statements in court, where she talks about the child, she's revealing a lot, in my opinion. There is an emphasis on her version and her narrative around her relationship with this little girl. There is, admittedly from her, on her behalf, a feeling of betrayal and a feeling of losing control, a feeling of the betrayal for me in her text that she sends him. How can you do this to me? Is a sense of superiority. How dare you do anything that would upset me? So there's a control thing there. And when somebody, how can you do this to me? When someone feels betrayed, and how can you do this to me? It's I might want to punish you, right? But there's another aspect to this that is very telling. She reveals a lot about, there's a deep undercurrent for me when she talks about Nada Jane that disturbs me to my bones. I get that statement earlier that day. She was, where was it? I want to say it exactly the way she said it. It actually gives me full body chills. She said earlier that day, she was lying with her hands under my shirt. That's her safe space. There's a level of intimacy she's revealing there. It gives me full body chills because it's revealing a sense of intimacy that she is so aware of, that she's chosen that particular moment. She's not saying, oh, she was playing with the toys, or we were watching a movie, or she was lying with her hands under my shirt. That's a safe space. When I think about some of the discussions we've had in the case studies we've done around the mindset of the pedophile, the minor attracted, there is a romanticizing and an emotional attachment often to the child. And the fact that it's been that the forensic pathologist gave the testimony that there's a history of abuse here, that the child had been assaulted. There are dynamics here that interlink the relationship between her and the 4-year-old little girl and the father, the dynamic between her and the father, but also the father working away and leaving the child in her care for periods of time. And then there being this distance fighting between them. It makes me think of my own experience where my attacker would constantly be in turmoil and in fights with his partner, with his wife, my aunt, and everybody else. Keep them busy with fights and things whilst he was secretly assaulting me. Almost in an attempt to dominate. I can hurt you. I can hurt you guys. The way I feel you're hurting me, I can hurt you. Yeah. So asserting power with the most vulnerable member of the family, but somebody that I know they all care about, So there's a lot here that just screams at me loud and clear. And obviously, it is still to be proven whether she's guilty or not. As a psychic medium, I read energy. I have my own deductions about this. But yeah, she's innocent until proven guilty. there's a lot of mitigating factors here. There's a lot of
I think regardless of the mitigating factors, you mentioned she was a teacher, etc. What I see here is sort of a love triangle, if you will. It's a power triangle, and it's a volatile mix of jealousy, control, and blurred roles, with this little girl in the middle. You know, they had a lot going on. There was a toxic push and pull between Amber and Ellie, and it was just unfortunate that Nadia Jane was pulled into the storm. But it's really interesting that you brought that up, because that also stood out to me when you were reading it. I thought, what is that about? You know, child's hands under. It just really stood out to me. It didn't sit well with me at all.
My theory, and it's just my theory, and I could be wrong, is that this looks to me, this screams at me, pedophile. Ellie was a hindrance. Ellie was an inconvenient. I think this entire relationship was for her to have more access to this child. I think that was just the perfect storm for her. I think that he was an inconvenient add-on in a sense, and
yeah, that does
a lot of her internal turmoil, a lot of her turmoil, and a guise for what she was truly hiding. That's what I think. That's what I think. Yeah. And should we take a look at some of the comments?
Absolutely.
So Tash went on to say, well, these were just some of the comments that stood out to me. Of course, there's many, many more. Tash said, why does her face look like she's speaking with disdain when she says baby girl's name? So she says Nada Jane. She actually, when she says Nada Jane, she really pronounces it. I would never heard Nada Jane. You know, there's a way that she speaks, and it's interesting to me that a lot of people are picking up on it. I know what it is. But Tash definitely wanted to point out the fact that when she says Nada Jane's name in court, it looks to her like there's this look of disdain on her face. That could be interpreted as it's disdain for the question. How can you even question that? But I think Tash is hit the nail on the head with this one.
That is such a good statement or comment that came from Tash. And like you said, just when someone refers to a child that they love, that they claim to love, especially a deceased child, you would normally have a very soft expression. But here we can see that there's a facial expression of almost disdain. And this is again my opinion, just as a psychological interpretation, it raises questions about her true emotional state and that inner conflict that you were talking about earlier. Because if you think of someone that you truly love and you think of someone that's passed on, you're going to have fond memories. And when you think of them, you know, your face is not going to, your lips are not going to curl. I looked at some of the YouTube videos where she was sitting in court and she's got slightly narrowed eyes. And you talk about the sneering tone when she says her name. So to me, from a psychological point of view, that all signals contempt. I don't know how you feel about it, or there's a certain sense of superiority. You know, it's like, it could indicate that she's got some sort of repressed resentment towards the child. So I think it's really interesting. If she loved the child, as you were reading through that, she had so much love for the child, but her facial expressions, like you said, are giving so much more away.
My take on this, what I see every time she says Nada Jane's name, the energy that I read behind that, yes, is disdain. But this is what I hear. How dare you question me? Because there is a sense of possession. It's like she
Yes.
owns Nada Jane. She'll say,
And
I've
yeah,
never heard Nada Jane. There's this I'm just getting this sense of possession and claim she belongs to me.
absolutely. And that
That's
comes with narcissistic wounding. There is definitely possessiveness. Like, in narcissistic abuse, victims and often children, they are viewed as an extension of that narcissist personality or identity. So if the child no longer fits that narcissist idealized image, they can be perceived as, oh, there's something wrong with me. So that makes sense. Um, but it's so interesting. Okay, let me just continue there. So what
okay.
I was trying to say is Amber often referred to Nada Jane as her everything. I think you said in your notes, or she was her best friend, or she was like my own child. And this all sounds affectionate. That's how I talk about my daughter. But we can see here through her facial expressions that is definitely, according to me, again, this is my opinion, that is definitely not the case here.
The next comment I wanted to highlight was from Missy D. And she says, "We know you would never do such, Amber. Stay strong! Exclamation mark. God is within you! Exclamation mark. I'm supporting you until the end! Exclamation mark." I just want to note that I went into Missy D's profile. There's no profile picture. Missy D is a flat earther and posts other people's content. So there's nothing about Missy D there. It's other people's opinions and thoughts. So I can't tell you too much about this individual other than no profile pic, flat earther, shares other people's content. This might be someone that knows Amber, but the statement, I mean, you must know this person if you're making such a strong statement. God is within you. Interesting. I'm supporting you until the end. We know you would never do such, Amber. Maybe it's a family member. Interesting comment, because can you truly ever say, can you say, Ruth, that I would never do such a thing? Would you say something like that? You don't know what I'm capable of. Even if you know me for 1,000,000 years, even if you know me for 10, 20 years, you cannot possibly say, I know Elif will never do that horrible thing. We're all capable of doing horrible things. So it's very interesting.
Indeed. I think it's comments like these that can make you stop and think. When someone is hiding behind a picture, they're reposting conspiracy theories. I also had a look at her, just briefly, at her profile. So yeah, it's really interesting there. There's a lot of denial and disassociation in that comment.
Yeah, I do find, especially with I do find just with the way that the world is that, and I mean, it's been the case for the longest time. That's why so much emphasis was put on how you look, how you speak, your career. People are more likely to trust you if you have a particular position, if you're a particular race. And that leads me to my next comment from Liungo. I'm going to botch some of these names sometimes, people. That's just what I do. Please forgive me. It's not intentional. The comment from a CD is probably one of this mindset, which, and you're free to have your opinion, but it just highlights to me one of the things that you and I are quite aware of, which is why we've decided to facilitate this healed online support group and a course in recovery. There are things, there's a way in which we look at the world. We expect these people to have telltale signs, to not be normal, regular people. Pedophiles work harder at gaining positions and notoriety, having a normal family, looking like everybody else, because they're devoted to hiding who they are, because you will not accept who they are, because there's so much fear associated with it, obviously. So Leungo says, please let her go. It's clearly a black man that did it. Which sort of confirms the statement I made, this profiling thing where we just, and I blame media. Media will push the coverage of violence when the perpetrator is a black person, will post their pictures, will show who they are. It's not always that if it's a white person that their names will be shown, or it's just common. It's not every day, of course, but predominantly, if a white person attacks 20 people in a shopping center, it's going to be worded in a particular way. It's not going to be John Stewart from this city went on a rampage and just decided to kill a whole lot of people, and we don't know why. They're going to say a Christian nationalist or a this, they're going to use some other ubiquitous term. Anyway, so please let her go. It's clearly a black man that did it. Leungo's got a Spider-Man profile picture, shares other people's content as well, and looks like a fake account. The reason why I say share other people's content, why I said that with Missy D too, is because to me that's an indication that you don't have original thoughts. Just me. It's okay if you don't have original thoughts. If you just like sharing other people's content, you're entitled to do that. But it's just an indication, it's an observation. For me, you don't have original thoughts. You share other people's thoughts and other people's words and other people's, especially on your page. Like we all share, but you're posting other people's content on your page. So maybe it's a fake account. But that is this person's comment. And this is unfortunately the mindset of many people. It must then be the gardener that she says, or someone else must have come into the house. She was alone with the child. After sending a message, it couldn't have been long because his friend came there before anybody else came. The friend showed up there. So she sent this message. It must not have been long after that message that his friend came there to check up on the child, and finds her face down in the bath. She's alone in the house with the child. She's there by herself. She's previously threatened to do exactly this. She threatened before the child's death as well. But it's easier for some people to believe that some black man that she didn't see come into the house did all of this and left unseen.
I just want to say there, Ella, first of all, there is no evidence whatsoever suggesting that anyone else, let alone a black man, committed this crime. And this kind of baseless accusation it's just irresponsible. It's racist. So, and second of all, like you said, this comment came from a Spider-Man profile pic. No original content and likely fake. I'm not going to say that it is that. Again, it's just my perception, my thoughts. So, people hide behind fake profiles so that they can push this type of harmful narratives without accountability. So we just need to be wary of that. And just let's be clear, defending someone by blaming an entire race it's not a defense. So um, in this case, I was going to say justice doesn't need carrot. It's just a baseless comment without any facts. And yeah, I don't find it helpful in any way. I think it's quite harming, to say the least.
And like you say, just racist. Then
Yeah,
there's Mona.
absolutely.
Mona's comment says, "Hoekom praat sy so snaaks?" English translation, why does she speak so funny, or why is her speech so strange?
Mhm.
What did you think of that? I want to know what you think she's referring to here. Do you think that Amber Hughes speaks,
Yes, I
that her
do think she's funny. And I think she's trying to, as she go along, make up and formulate. And this is what comes out sort of a robotic. That is my perception of her. It shows the level of inauthenticity that she has. She's contradicted herself so many times just from the clips that I've seen. So for me, she is trying to, maintain her perception. And again, this is my own opinion. A narcissist often does this. It's all about them. So how does this statement that I'm making look in relation to me? She thinks about these, and the way it comes across is very robotic, very unauthentic.
You said, you used the word twice, robotic. That says to me, there is no feeling. It's insincere.
Mm.
She's speaking with no feeling behind it. That to me is signs of a potential sociopath or psychopath, not even a narcissist. So that's what Mona picks up here. And then that takes me to Emily's comment, which I want to give my insights on. Emily says, does she have an accent? What's wrong with her? Question mark. And the rape charges, she was the only one there. That's enough. So to Emily, it's enough. She was the only one there. Okay. She says, does she have an accent? When Amber speaks, she does this thing. I've noticed it. I've got some family members that'll do it. It's something that irks me, where they will speak in an accent that has a little bit of in Durban, we call it a twang, a little bit of an Indian twang,
Yeah.
or a colored twang, or a white twang, or a black twang. She's speaking with a bit of twang, right? And that twang there is a little bit native to me. It's a little bit, it can border a little bit on maybe colored, maybe black. Now, when somebody speaks with the twang, how I interpret that is that you are wanting to manipulate somebody's sense of familiarity with you. So, for example, if it's as if I get you, it's a I get you, I'm like you. It's got that undertone for me. So if I hear an accent of a colored chick from Cape Town like yours, even though you live in New Zealand, I'm like, okay, there's things she gets about me that other people from other communities might not. There's just something we have a background that, even though you and I might just have met, there's a background that we share. There are cultural nuances, cultural familiarities that give you insight into things that make up who I am culturally. So when people speak, when a white person speaks to a black person with a black twang, it's as if they're trying to manipulate them, unless they grew up and that's the accent they have. But for me, the way that I'm interpreting it, she's emphasizing that. It's obviously practiced. It usually is, but there's an emphasis of, I'm like you, I get you, of wanting to create familiarity or connection, which is something that if I go to Mitchell's Plain tomorrow and I see some of my friends that are from the area and we talk, my lingo is going to change. My dialect's going to change a little bit because that's the way we used to talk. And it's like, that's what I get from that. She's definitely speaking with the twang. And it's one that emphasizes I'm down to earth. It's also where she's really accentuating her words in a sense. She's wanting to say each word outright. She wants to pronounce each word. It gives her a little bit more time to think about what she's going to say. And she also wants to make sure that you are hearing what she wants you to hear. There's not a lot of emotion behind it. So it's as if, it's like I'm speaking to you now. It's like I'm saying, she's wanting to, I'm not just saying, yeah, she's wanting to make, because I want to be sure the audience is hearing what I'm saying. And that's what she's doing. And so she's got a twang. She's got it's a South African accent. It's not a different accent, but there's a twang there for sure. And what people are picking up, because so many people commented about the way she spoke, people are picking up on the fact that it's robotic. They're picking up on the fact that she's emphasizing where she doesn't need to. It's as if she's trying to emphasize emotion with her words because there are no emotion. Right? She's flat. So I must emphasize what I am saying to try and project emotion because there really is a dating. And that's my take on that. But I think that's why so many people commented on that, because a lot of people did notice that.
I feel like it's acting at its finest. And again, that's just my perception. It's a definite, deliberate and calculated way of trying to, in my opinion, control the outcome. She's trying to deliberately use her words and think about them. Absolutely robotic. There's no emotion, like you say, behind it.
That she's a good actress. I don't think she's a good actress either.
No.
That, but also I think that the level of consciousness in the collective is elevated to the point where people are reading her facial expressions, reading her energy, are able to see and recognize the red flags there. They just don't necessarily know how to put words to it. But there's definitely an awareness of the fact that Amber Hughes is very possibly I think she's a psychopath. I think she's a psychopath. But that's just me. That's my opinion. The case is still in court. She's innocent until proven guilty. And so that's how it goes. These are the cases we managed to cover this time round. And I think these were interesting conversations, Ruth. I'd love to hear from our guests, our audience, what their thoughts are. Put in the comments the red flags, put in the comments some of the things that stood out to you. We hope to cover many more in this episode, but the amount of gender-based violence crimes that surface in a week is overwhelming. And we've covered so much here that we've spent quite a bit of time with you guys in this episode. So we're hoping to give more of these victims a voice in more of our episodes on a more regular basis. But we do case studies where we dive deep into interviews with pedophiles in every second episode. So you can look forward to another one of those. Yeah. I just want to say, please, guys, do not forget, share these stories, share this on your social media platforms, groups, spread awareness. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That's the best way you can support our channel.
Thank you, Ella. Thank you so much. It was a really interesting discussion. I really enjoyed it. Like Ella said, there's so many cases. Like and share and favorite this, help our community grow and the awareness around these issues. And if there is any stories that you would like us to cover in particular, you might know of something that we don't, please put it in the chat. If you would like to share your personal story, you can email us at the email below. But it was an absolute privilege to have all of you here today, and we look forward to the next episode. Elif, thank you so much. It was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for all the case studies that we could go through today, and there's many more. So we'll see you next time. Love and light to you all.
Okay, bye.